Picture this. It's 1982, inside the private chapel of the Vatican. The Pope himself is facing something that would terrify most people. A young woman writhing on the floor, spitting, crawling like an animal, while an ancient evil speaks through her lips. For 400 years, no pope had dared to personally confront demonic possession. But Karol Wojtyla, known to the world as Pope John Paul II, wasn't just any pope. He was about to break centuries of papal precedent and engage in direct spiritual warfare that would shock even seasoned Vatican officials. What happened in those sacred halls would forever change how the Catholic Church approaches the supernatural, and the demons themselves would later confess why they feared this particular pope above all others. Chapter 1. The Forgotten Practice. Exorcism, a word that sends chills down most people's spines, yet it represents one of Christianity's most ancient practices. In Catholic doctrine, exorcism is the formal expulsion of evil spirits through prayer, holy water, and the authority of Christ himself. The Church has always acknowledged the reality of demonic possession, but for nearly 4 centuries, popes had delegated this terrifying responsibility to specially trained priests. The ritual of exorcism demands immense spiritual strength, unwavering faith, and extraordinary courage. Most clergy spend decades preparing for such encounters, studying demonology, psychology, and theology to distinguish between genuine possession and mental illness. The Catholic Church maintains strict protocols, medical evaluations, psychological assessments, and extensive investigation before any exorcism is authorized. But here's what makes Pope John Paul II's actions so remarkable. He didn't just authorize exorcisms, he performed them personally. This Polish pope, who had survived Nazi occupation and communist oppression, possessed a spiritual fortitude that even demons would come to acknowledge. If you're fascinated by stories of faith conquering darkness, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're about to explore some of the most documented cases of papal exorcism in modern history. What drove a pope to break 4 centuries of tradition and face evil head-on? The answer lies in a desperate plea from a small Italian town, where a young woman named Francesca had become something unrecognizable to her own family. Chapter 2. The Case of Francesca. The spring of 1982 brought an unusual visitor to Vatican City. Monsignor Alberti, Bishop of Spoleto, arrived with a burden that no medical professional could explain. He carried with him the case file of Francesca, a young Italian woman whose affliction had baffled doctors and psychiatrists across the country. Her symptoms weren't just unusual, they were impossible by any natural explanation. Francesca exhibited supernatural strength that required multiple men to restrain her. She spoke in languages she had never learned, revealed intimate secrets about people she had never met, and demonstrated a violent aversion to anything sacred. Her body contorted in ways that defied human anatomy, and her voice transformed into something that witnesses described as inhuman. When Cardinal Jacques Martin, the prefect of the papal household, first saw her case documentation, he knew they were dealing with something beyond the realm of medicine or psychology. What happened next stunned Vatican officials. When Monsignor Alberti requested a papal audience for this disturbed young woman, Pope John Paul II didn't hesitate, didn't delegate, didn't refer the case to the Church's trained exorcists. Instead, he personally agreed to perform the exorcism in his private chapel, a decision that broke 400 years of papal precedent. The date was set for March 27th, and those present would witness something they never imagined seeing in their lifetimes. The scene that unfolded in the Pope's private chapel was like something from the Gospels themselves. Francesca began writhing on the floor, spitting, crawling like an animal, while unearthly sounds emerged from her throat. Seasoned Vatican officials, men who had witnessed countless ceremonies and solemn occasions, stood frozen as they watched their Holy Father calmly approach this manifestation of evil. Pope John Paul II later confided to Bishop Alberti, "Nothing like this had ever happened to me in my life." But he didn't retreat. He pressed forward with prayers, holy water, and the authority of his apostolic office. The exorcism was successful. Francesca was completely freed from her torment, and exactly 1 year later, she returned to the Vatican, pregnant, accompanied by her husband, radiating the joy of a woman who had been given her life back. She went on to have 4 children and live a completely normal life. But this was just the beginning of Pope John Paul II's direct confrontations with supernatural evil. Chapter 3: The Second Confrontation. 2 years after the Francesca case, another desperate family found their way to the Vatican. This time, the possessed individual was another young woman, trapped in the same horrifying cycle of supernatural torment that had once enslaved Francesca. Word had spread through certain Catholic circles that Pope John Paul II possessed an unusual gift, or perhaps calling, for confronting demonic forces directly. The Vatican rarely discusses the specific details of this 1984 case, but Father Gabriele Amorth, Rome's most renowned exorcist, confirmed that the Pope once again personally intervened. Unlike many exorcism cases that require multiple sessions over months or even years, this papal intervention was swift and decisive. The young woman was permanently freed from her affliction in a single encounter, never to be troubled by supernatural forces again. What's remarkable about these early cases is the complete success rate. While experienced exorcists like Father Amorth often struggled with particularly stubborn cases, sometimes requiring dozens of sessions, Pope John Paul II seemed to possess an authority that demons couldn't resist or ignore. This pattern wouldn't go unnoticed by the powers of darkness. They were beginning to recognize that this particular pope represented a unique threat to their operations. But it was a public incident in the year 2000 that would reveal just how much the demonic realm feared Karol Wojtyla. What happened in St. Peter's Square that September day would be witnessed by thousands and broadcast around the world. Chapter 4: The Public Revelation. September 6th, 2000 started like any other Wednesday at the Vatican. Thousands of pilgrims gathered in St. Peter's Square for the weekly papal audience, expecting the usual blessings, teachings, and gentle papal demeanor they had come to love. Among them sat a 19-year-old Italian girl named Sabrina, positioned in the front row where she could see the Holy Father clearly. What no one knew was that Sabrina had been battling demonic possession since age 12. As Pope John Paul II concluded his address and began moving through the crowd in his Pope-mobile, something extraordinary happened. Sabrina suddenly began screaming in what witnesses described as a cavernous voice, a sound so unnatural and terrifying that even the Vatican's security guards froze in shock. Her body began convulsing with supernatural strength, requiring multiple men to restrain her as she shouted incomprehensible words that seemed to pierce the very air. The scene unfolding before thousands of faithful was unprecedented in modern papal history. Here, in the heart of Catholicism's most sacred space, evil was manifesting itself in broad daylight, challenging the Pope's authority before the entire world. Bishop Giovanni Danzi quickly alerted the Holy Father, who immediately stepped down from his Pope-mobile and approached the possessed young woman. What happened next would be remembered by every witness present. Pope John Paul II spent over 30 minutes praying over Sabrina, holding her gently while she thrashed and screamed. His compassion was evident as he embraced this tormented soul, promising to celebrate Mass for her the following day. The Pope's intervention provided temporary relief. Sabrina calmed significantly, but this wasn't a complete exorcism. The demon remained, and in a later session with Father Amorth, it mockingly declared, "See, not even the head of your church can expel me." This public incident revealed something crucial. While Pope John Paul II possessed extraordinary spiritual authority, even he couldn't instantly resolve every case of demonic possession. Some battles required sustained effort, specialized techniques, and the collaboration of trained exorcists. Yet what struck Father Amorth most was how violently the demons reacted to the Pope's mere presence, a phenomenon that would lead to some shocking revelations about why evil forces particularly feared this Polish pontiff. Chapter 5, The Testimony of Father Gabriele Amorth. Father Gabriele Amorth wasn't just any priest. He was Rome's chief exorcist for over 25 years, personally conducting more than 70,000 exorcisms during his remarkable career. When Father Amorth spoke about supernatural encounters, Vatican officials listened. His detailed documentation of demonic behavior, psychological patterns, and spiritual warfare tactics made him the Church's foremost authority on possession cases. So when he repeatedly testified about Pope John Paul II's unique power over evil forces, his words carried extraordinary weight. During numerous exorcism sessions, Father Amorth discovered something that astonished him. Demons displayed an unusual and violent fear when Pope John Paul II was mentioned. In one documented case, Father Amorth carried a relic of St. John Paul II in his pocket during an exorcism. Without any external indication of the relic's presence, the possessed person suddenly screamed, "Take him away! Take him away!" The demons somehow sensed the spiritual presence of the late pope through a simple physical relic. Curious about this phenomenon, Father Amorth directly questioned demons during exorcisms about their fear of Pope John Paul II. The responses he received were both chilling and illuminating. The demons gave two primary reasons for their terror. First, because he dismantled my plans, referring to the Pope's role in the collapse of atheistic communism across Eastern Europe. Second, because he snatched many young people from my hands, alluding to the millions of youth inspired by his message during World Youth Days worldwide. For those seeking deeper spiritual protection and the intercession of powerful saints, we've compiled an extraordinary resource: 50 Saints, Stories and Prayers for Divine Intervention. This comprehensive ebook features the life stories and specific prayers of saints known for their power against evil forces, including St. John Paul II himself. You'll find this invaluable spiritual arsenal in our store below, a perfect companion for anyone wanting to strengthen their spiritual defenses through the communion of saints. But Father Amorth's testimonies revealed something even more extraordinary about the late Pope's continued influence from beyond the grave. Even after death, John Paul II's spiritual authority seemed to transcend the boundary between life and eternity. Chapter 6: Doctrinal Impact and Spiritual Warfare. Pope John Paul II's personal involvement in exorcism sent shockwaves through Catholic theology and practice worldwide. In 1998, he authorized the first major revision of the Church's official rite of exorcism in nearly 4 centuries. A document that had remained virtually unchanged since 1514. This wasn't mere administrative updating. It represented a fundamental recommitment to acknowledging supernatural evil as a real present threat requiring direct confrontation. The theological implications were profound. By personally performing exorcisms, Pope John Paul II was making a definitive statement about the nature of reality itself. In an increasingly secular world that explained away spiritual phenomena through psychology and medicine, this pope declared that evil was not just a concept or metaphor. It was a personal, intelligent force actively working against human souls. His actions reaffirmed the Church's ancient teaching that spiritual warfare is not symbolic, but literal. This doctrinal reinforcement came at a crucial time in Church history. Many Catholics had begun viewing exorcism as an outdated medieval practice, better left to horror movies than modern religious life. Seminary training in demonology had declined, and fewer priests were willing or prepared to confront cases of genuine possession. Pope John Paul II's example reversed this trend, inspiring a new generation of clergy to take spiritual warfare seriously and seek proper training in discernment and exorcism procedures. His approach was notably balanced, emphasizing the need for medical and psychological evaluation before concluding supernatural causes, yet never dismissing the reality of demonic influence when properly discerned. This balanced methodology became the gold standard for Catholic exorcism protocols worldwide, combining rigorous investigation with unwavering faith in Christ's power over evil. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Pope John Paul II's legacy in spiritual warfare would only become apparent after his death, when his influence seemed to grow even stronger rather than diminish. Chapter 7: Legacy and Continuing Influence. The canonization of Pope John Paul II as Saint John Paul II in 2014 marked a new chapter in his war against evil forces. Father Amorth and other exorcists began invoking the newly canonized saint during their most difficult cases, and the results were extraordinary. Demons that had resisted multiple exorcism attempts for months suddenly manifested violent reactions to St. John Paul II's intercession, often leading to complete liberation of the possessed individuals. This posthumous power wasn't limited to formal exorcism cases. Catholics worldwide began reporting unusual spiritual protection when invoking St. John Paul II's intercession during times of spiritual attack, depression, or supernatural oppression. Prayer groups dedicated to his memory formed across continents, specifically focused on spiritual warfare and protection against evil influences. The saint who had confronted demons in life continued his battle from heaven with even greater effectiveness. Pope Francis himself appears to have been influenced by his predecessor's example. In 2013, television cameras captured what appeared to be Pope Francis performing prayers of liberation over individuals during public audiences. Though the Vatican carefully distinguished these as prayers of healing rather than formal exorcisms. The precedent set by Pope John Paul II had clearly established that papal involvement in spiritual warfare was not only acceptable but sometimes necessary. The impact extended beyond individual cases to influence global Catholic culture. Churches began offering more education about spiritual warfare, discernment of spirits, and protection prayers. Catholic universities reinstated courses on demonology and supernatural theology. The saint who had helped bring down the Iron Curtain through prayer and diplomacy had also helped tear down the curtain of denial that had hidden spiritual warfare from modern Catholic consciousness. Yet perhaps the most powerful legacy of St. John Paul II's exorcisms lies not in dramatic supernatural encounters, but in the quiet courage they inspire in ordinary believers facing their own spiritual battles. Conclusion: the exorcisms of Pope John Paul II reveal a profound truth that transcends religious boundaries. The battle between good and evil is not abstract theology, it's personal, immediate, and ongoing in every human life. When Karol Wojtyla chose to break 4 centuries of papal precedent and confront demonic forces personally, he wasn't just helping individual souls find freedom. He was demonstrating that no position, no matter how exalted, exempts us from engaging in the spiritual warfare that defines human existence. His example teaches us that true authority comes not from avoiding difficult battles, but from facing them with faith, compassion, and unwavering trust in divine power. Whether we're confronting supernatural evil, personal demons, or the darkness that exists within human systems and institutions, the principles remain the same. Evil must be acknowledged, confronted, and defeated through spiritual strength rather than human wisdom alone. St. John Paul II showed us that victory is possible, but it requires the courage to engage rather than retreat. Today, as you face your own spiritual challenges, whether dramatic or subtle, remember that you have access to the same divine authority that enabled a Polish pope to make demons tremble. The saints who have gone before us, especially St. John Paul II, continue their intercession on our behalf. Don't face spiritual darkness alone. If this video has strengthened your faith or opened your eyes to the reality of spiritual warfare, please share it with others who need encouragement in their own battles. Subscribe for more stories of faith conquering fear, and remember the light has already won. We're just living out the victory.